Excellent. So now everyone can see us, hopefully, and we can start. Sigal will start.
Okay. So hi, I'm Sigal Meged-Rosen, CLO of Cyberbit.
And I'm Noah Meyer, Head of Business Development and Innovation at Yigal Arnon Law Firm.
And we both co-head the Legal Operations Forum, which I'm very excited to open our first virtual meeting for 2020. I'm a great believer in creating processes and efficiencies, and I think that legal departments in all shapes and sizes should adopt legal operations and create greater value. This will result in saving time and money, short response time, and free up time for lawyers to actually do lawyers' work and focus on more strategic issues. I would like to introduce our speakers for today, who will share their insights and tips on where and how to start implementing legal operations. So Neville Eisenberg is the CEO of BCLP Cubed and jointly developed the concept with BCLP's Chief Innovation Officer, Katie Tadmor. He has a track record in legal innovation and was managing partner of legacy firm BLP when it launched various pioneering services such as Lawyers on Demand. Neville joined legacy firm Berwin Layton as a corporate lawyer, became managing partner in 1999, was senior partner of Berwin Layton Paisner until its merger with Brian Cave in 2018. Jody Jansen is Chief Technology Officer for BCLP Cubed. He has worked in legal technology and legal innovation for the past 20 years, and over the course of his career has led long-term technology strategy for large international law firms, as well as developing unique and innovative internal and client-facing solutions. He previously held the role of Global Technical Program Manager for Allen & Overy and was formerly Head of Architecture and Innovation of International Law for Gowling WLG.
So thank you, Neville and Jody, for joining us. I'll just say a quick word before we get to the real gist of things. I've known Neville, I think, for about 5 or 6 years, since I first visited London to meet colleagues of mine heading business development departments in big law firms. And it's interesting to look back and see what the topics of discussions in those conversations were. About practice areas and legal services and how we work with clients and so on. Whereas in our latest meeting, which was quite a while ago, and now with COVID-19, who knows when we'll meet face to face again. But in our latest meeting, we discussed processes and service provision methods and ways of doing business, which are completely different topics to the actual legal content that was discussed before. And that's, of course, I think, indicative of what's on the table and what's interesting in the legal services industry for both law firms and for in-house GCs. So just putting that frame around our meeting today, moving the talk to you, Neville and Jody.
Thank you very much, Noah, and thank you, Sigal, for those kind introductions. Good morning, everybody. Both Jody and I are delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you this morning and present a few thoughts. Jody's going to control the screen, so I'll be asking him to move slides. So a quick summary of what we're going to cover this morning. So I'm going to start really with a few general observations regarding the market for legal services, and then some thoughts on how to get going with legal operations, really based on my experience and the experience of other colleagues in my firm in talking to general counsel and helping some of our clients with the journey of legal operations. And then Jody's going to get a little bit more specific on how to create a technology-driven solution using commercial contracting as a specific example. And then I'll provide a short summary with some takeaways at the end, and there should be plenty of time for questions or discussion. So if we could move on to the next slide, which at the top has a quote from someone you might have heard of, Richard Susskind, generally regarded as one of the leading, if not the leading guru on technology and the law globally. And I know Richard well, and he often tells the story of how in 1987, in his first book, he wrote that, in his opinion, email would become the most common form of communication between lawyers. And at the time, he was called irresponsible. I think the Law Society suggested that he should be banned from speaking in public for making such outrageously irresponsible comments. And of course, we all know what happened after that. So the quote at the top, people don't want lawyers, they want outcomes and solutions that lawyers bring, might be a bit regarded as a little bit controversial, and Richard certainly doesn't shy away from being controversial, but it's a consistent theme of his. Another story he tells is of a keynote address he gave to the annual conference of neurosurgeons a couple of years ago. And he stood up, and one of the first comments he made was that people don't want doctors. Nobody really wants doctors. What people want is health. They want the outcomes which doctors can provide. Another story he tells relates to a household object, a Black & Decker drill. And in a similar vein, he makes the comment that most people, there might be a few people out there that really love owning a beautiful, well-constructed, highly engineered drill. But really what most people want is the hole in the wall. And quite how they get there doesn't really matter to them. They're not interested in all the technology which Black & Decker bring to create their superb drills. All they're interested in is whether they're going to get the hole in the wall, the outcome that they really need. And it's really that theme which drives the comment that what people are really interested in are the outcomes that lawyers bring, rather than the process of lawyering. And a consistent theme of this presentation will be that it's all about the outcomes. And in my experience, lawyers are not yet focused enough, it's a generalization, but are not yet focused enough on the overall business solution, the business outcome that people are looking for through the legal process. Business solutions, legal solutions, combines legal expertise with other tools and skills to produce a good business outcome. And we'll be exploring that in a little bit more detail in this presentation. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Now, of course, legal practice is different in each country. Laws are different. Regulation of the legal profession is different. But where there has been deregulation of the legal profession, for example, in the UK, where we are based, but also in other countries like Australia, a new legal landscape is rapidly emerging. And we're finding versions of this in really in most countries around the world, where countries are at slightly different stages, but we're seeing this new landscape either emerging fairly rapidly or emerging slowly. And the diagram is a bit of a simplification, but it helps makes the point that I want to make, which is, and let's go through it quickly. So on the left, we have traditional legal practice. That's what I became a lawyer to do, to be an expert on the law, to help draft contracts, to help defend clients against claims. And I think it's fair to say that for complicated legal work, the traditional approach is generally still, in most cases, appropriate. And also it's fair to say that the process of providing traditional legal advice does benefit from increasing optimization. So we have expert systems, we have collaboration platforms, we have knowledge management technology, all of which helps lawyers in providing their traditional service. And those innovations are certainly important and worth considering in law firms, but also in in-house legal departments. What we also have is the emergence of what I called, perhaps a bit provocatively, legal factories. Legal factories really are designed to deal with business as usual work, so less complicated, usually higher volume, and that's where legal operations really becomes important in helping to deliver that work more efficiently. So where are these legal factories? What are we talking about? Well, the big four are pretty much all trying to build legal factories. We've all heard of LPOs based in India, in Asia. There's some in South Africa, scattered around the world, which aim to do sort of low complexity, high volume legal work very efficiently. But they're springing up all over the place, including in my own law firm. And I'll come on to just explaining in a minute or two what BCLP Cube is all about, because it more or less falls in the same category. And then we have what I've called marketplaces, which are markets for resource and services which are relevant to legal practice. So, for example, legal knowledge, we have publishing companies, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, companies like that, which provide a marketplace for legal knowledge. We have a growing legal tech sector. We have markets for flexible legal resource for lawyers who can work on a flexible basis consistently with the emergence of the gig economy. So I think this breakdown, this evolution of the way the market for legal services is developing is putting a real spotlight on outcomes, because the outcomes which clients expect from for complex traditional service as opposed to the higher volume legal factory type work is very different. Now, I mentioned my own firm. If we can move on to the next slide, please. We developed something called BCLP Cubed, and I'm just mentioning this really as an example of some of the new ways of delivering legal services that are emerging. So in 2018, I was asked, along with Katie DeBoard, our Chief Innovation Officer, to review the firm's innovation strategy. And we went off to talk to our clients and to General Counsel. And one of the key messages that we got from General Counsel was that when it comes to complex work, on the whole, they felt reasonably well served by external legal providers and internally in-house as well. But when it came to the less complicated business as usual type work, the message we were getting is that often that's a bit of a mess. It's increasingly difficult for them to continue doing that work in-house at the right cost. The volumes of work is growing, but it's hard to hire more resource. And when they come to consider options for outsourcing that work, law firms generally are either not set up for it or are unable to do it at the right price, or are simply not really interested in doing that type of work. And the alternative providers that are out there, while some of them are able to help here and there, on the whole, they don't enjoy the same levels of trust and confidence which in-house lawyers require in order to confidently outsource all that work. So they said to us, you know, why don't any law firms try and address this to help their clients? We took that away as a challenge when we came up with BCLP Cubed, which, like a cube, has 3 dimensions to it. So the first dimension, which you see on the left, is a platform for efficiently delivering high volume legal services. That means having the right people, having the right technology platform, and the right processes in place. And then we combine that with the second dimension, which is the legal expertise, the traditional legal expertise that we have across the firm. And the third dimension is the legal operations support to help our clients organize themselves to outsource that work to us, and also to ensure that we're doing it in the most efficient way. And the objectives of providing this service, which are listed in the middle of the slide, is firstly to create cost savings for clients, get the work done more cheaply. Secondly, to help more effective management of risk. And thirdly, to capture data and provide insights from that data, which companies can find valuable in their general business. Now, we launched this 7 months ago with the 4 initial products that you see at the bottom of the slide. And the key to this is that it has to be scalable. So this is not providing the service here and there, occasionally to a client, but each product we develop has to be really capable of being scaled up to many clients, large volumes, in order to generate the benefits we're aiming to generate for clients. So I describe this as a live example of how important legal operations is becoming in the delivery of legal services, not only for alternative providers in the Big Four, but also for those law firms who are seeking to help clients with this type of work. Can we move to the next slide, please? So how does one get organized for legal operations? Well, I think the first thing that one has to recognize is that it is a different approach. One reason why it's different is that it's multidisciplinary. So when I started our practice as a lawyer, there were lawyers and there were secretaries, and that was pretty much it. There might have been a few, there was an IT department, and there was a mailroom and all of that, but on the whole, the lawyer did the work and controlled the whole process. I think that's the key, really, controlled the whole process. Whereas the purpose of legal operations is to create a service which is much more multidisciplinary, which benefits from legal process management, from technology expertise, process engineering, pricing expertise, a whole range of skills which comes together with the legal expertise in order to deliver an outcome which is far more focused and designed to solve business challenges than just providing legal advice. Now, I've facilitated sessions for in-house legal departments and helped GCs sort of get going on the journey of legal operations. And whenever I think about that, I'm reminded of one of the first of such sessions I ran, which was to help the GC of an insurance company start on the journey of legal operations. So we organized a half-day workshop with him and his senior team. And we all got together, and I did a short presentation with some colleagues about the evolution of the legal market. And then we had a whole agenda plan to talk, the purpose of which was really to develop a strategy or start on the journey of developing a legal ops strategy for this legal department. But just as we were about to embark on that, what became clear was that the 8 or 10 people sitting around the table really had no idea what they were each doing. So we then spent the rest of the morning with each of these members of the legal team going around the table, telling the rest of their colleagues what they do, what their challenges are, what they're proud of achieving, etc. And by the time all of that finished, the session was over, and we had to postpone the agenda to another time. But the team involved found it immensely valuable. They'd never had an opportunity to sit down and just chat about the work that was being done in the legal department, because of course everyone is too busy trying to deal with the daily urgent work that needs to be done. So it's quite important, I think, before one really gets going, to ensure that the team understands who does what. And then I think a useful thing to discuss is what is the company's strategy and business priorities, and to have a discussion around the degree to which the legal department is aligned in terms of the services it provides to what the business generally is trying to achieve with the business of the company. And then the next step from that is to consider what is coming down the pipe. So what is the company's strategy for the future? Is there going to be M&A? Is the company planning to release new products or enter new markets? Are there new regulations coming down the pipe which the legal department needs to prepare for? So having a good sense of what the likely new demands are going to be over the next 1, 2, or 3 years, I think is an important next step. And then, of course, to have the discussion about how the legal department is going to best organize itself in order to deliver the business outcomes that the company needs. And following that discussion, I think it's also really important, and again, this is where legal operations can really help, to have a discussion about how the legal department can aim to deliver more value to the rest of the business in the future, beyond just delivering the basic legal service. And I'll give you an example. There have been studies in the US which have concluded that on average, there is value leakage from company contracts, and that on average, that comes to about 9% of revenue of companies. So 9% on average of revenue of companies is being lost through a variety of different weak links in the contracting process. It might be bad management of contracts, missed deadlines, and contracts not being enforced effectively, etc. So imagine if through different processes, a more efficient way of managing the life cycle of contracts, a legal department were able to demonstrate that it was helping companies recapture back some of that lost revenue. What a huge value add. Next slide, please. Right, so where to start? So firstly, it's not only a mindset change, it requires real change. And while I was preparing for today, I was interrupted yesterday by a phone call from one of my partners at BCLP. And we've been pitching with this partner recently for a major new work stream from a global bank. And this partner had asked for a call, and I got on the phone with him, and he said to me, Neville, I'm really upset. I haven't enjoyed this pitch process at all. So I said, well, Tariq, be open. What's worrying you? And he said, I feel as though I'm a component of this pitch. I'm not, I don't feel as though I have the control that I normally have in these circumstances. And I don't know how to deal with that. It's, I've never experienced that before. And I thought, that was really revealing, because, here's an extremely clever, very highly competent lawyer recognizing that a multidisciplinary approach requires real change in how lawyers function. And instead of controlling the process themselves alone, it's now a team effort. And that is an example of the kind of change which one really has to manage quite carefully. So the second suggestion I'd make is to appoint someone to take the lead on legal operations. And I don't think one necessarily has to go out and hire an expensive legal operations expert. One client of mine decided to appoint one of the secretaries, a fairly experienced senior secretary, but one of the secretaries in the legal department as head of legal operations. And the GC decided to invest a little bit in getting the secretary trained up. And I have to say, she has been remarkably successful. She has learned a huge amount. She did secondments in the company's procurement department. She went out and did a few courses, and she has become an expert on legal operations and is really helping the legal department now become much more efficient. Next step, I think, is to identify a priority for change. So what would make a really positive difference to the business? Is it faster execution of contracts? Is it providing some kind of self-help tool for the company's sales force so that they don't have to come back to the legal department every time they make a new sale in order to get the contract approved? Can one put processes in place where for non-controversial agreements they can get signed up by people in the business? Is it trying to recapture some of the 9% of lost revenue that I mentioned a few minutes ago through acquiring a contract lifecycle management tool? What would be a really good positive change for the business, and then identifying that as a place to start? Next one, really should consider getting some advice. And there are plenty of people out there who can help facilitate a meeting, provide some advice on how to get going with legal operations, what the alternatives are. And there are consultants. Some law firms do it. The Big Four are all offering this kind of consulting work. And it really doesn't need McKinsey, to be honest. But if you have a few $1 million spare, I'm sure McKinsey would be more than happy to provide you with the service as well. Brainstorming with the team is really important. In my experience, the team often has very good ideas, and this doesn't only apply to legal departments. It applies equally to my own teams of people who, to be honest, usually know exactly what needs to be done, but sometimes haven't had the opportunity to express their views or to properly formulate their views. The right platform to express their views, discuss it with colleagues. So providing that opportunity for the team to brainstorm is often a hugely productive and valuable exercise. And then, of course, one builds a plan for operationalizing the legal department over time. Next slide, please. So a few key first steps. And I think my key message on this page is that there's lots to do before one even really thinks about technology. I think there is sometimes a temptation to immediately jump to thinking about what technology tools can I use to get me going with legal operations. But in fact, there's quite a lot of thinking and work and improvement that can be done before one even reaches that point. For example, process engineering, process review. This is really quite a unique skill. One needs to get properly qualified people to help with a genuine process review exercise, which really involves breaking down in a very disciplined way each activity into component parts, and then figuring out how the process can be re-engineered in order to produce faster outcomes, more efficient outcomes, get work done at the right level, because often work is being done by people that are overqualified or much more senior than is necessary. Disaggregation. So disaggregation is probably a familiar concept to most of you. Really what this means is, again, in some ways shares some features with process engineering, but it's about breaking down projects or tasks or work streams or the overall work of the legal department into different categories, figuring out whether some of it can be outsourced at cheaper cost in order to try and achieve some economies of scale, and whether complex tasks can be split into the genuinely complex aspects and the more straightforward or process-driven type aspects, which can be handled in a different way. Third point I've really mentioned before is that it's important to go narrow, not to try and achieve too much too soon. So pick one thing. And, you know, I think it was Noah that mentioned COVID-19. Obviously, we're still in the middle of this pandemic. And in my experience, what many of our clients are experiencing issues with at the moment is supply chain disruption. So maybe that's the thing to pick on, to say, well, that's a real issue for our company at the moment. What can we do to try and mitigate the disruption we're experiencing with our supply chain? Lean training for some of the staff in the department is always valuable because it gets people's mindset in the right direction and learning some of the skills necessary for effective legal ops. And process and people. It's always important to get one's processes as efficient as possible and to get the right people doing the right things before one really considers the technology tools. Because otherwise you end up doing things in a slightly back to front way, and Jody will come back to this theme when he speaks in a bit more detail about technology. So over time, what the objective is to develop an operating model for the legal department. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And I'm not going to go through this diagram in detail. It attempts to capture the key elements of how a legal department operates, internal relationships, external relationships. Obviously, one can't address all the elements of this type of model straight away, but just beginning to create a diagram like this helps one prioritize and to and also to keep track of where improvements are necessary and where one is being effective. Next slide, please. This slide, which is my last slide before I hand over to Jody, really just summarizes some of the key areas we find General Counsel are looking at when reviewing their legal operations. Again, I'm not going to go through each of these, but just before I do hand over to Jody, I'm going to quickly come back to something I mentioned a minute ago, supply chain disruption in the context of the global pandemic. And of course, while many countries are now moving out of their lockdown phase, lots are also quite worried about a potential second wave and even a third wave, which could bring further disruption. Now, I was reading about a study recently where 3/4 of companies have experienced supply chain disruption, and almost half of companies, this was a US study, so just that caveat, had no contingency plans in place for supply chain disruption. And of course, supply chains are governed by contracts, and legal departments own the contracting process. So if one were to say, look, we're going to try and really address this particular challenge, it's a major challenge for us, how can one go about it through adopting a legal operations approach? Well, firstly, one wants to try and achieve more agility in the company's supply chain through the contracting process. So, for example, try not to expose the company to single points of failure. Find mechanisms in the contract to add or replace suppliers with the minimum of friction. Being able to capture data from contracts in order to predict risks in the and weaknesses in the supply chain in order to be able to take corrective action more quickly is valuable. Being able to identify which suppliers are in high-risk categories or high-risk countries, which suppliers have exclusivity or minimum commitments, which might make it harder to replace them, and also what the alternative suppliers are. So who can one replace existing suppliers with? How quickly can one get new contracts in place? So the transactional velocity of the legal department. How can one speed up the negotiating process? How can one ensure that contracts get closed more quickly through avoiding sort of traditional ways of signing up contracts and doing sort of click accepts or things like that? and avoiding unnecessary friction in the negotiating process by having excluding unnecessary clauses and boilerplate which really serve no purpose at all, but are there just because they've always been there. So I want to give that just as an example of the sorts of approach one can adopt in a particular area through better process, using technology and a legal operations approach in order to achieve these kind of benefits for the company. Right, Jody, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. I wanted to give an example how we in Cube go from an ID into a production-ready product and what terminology we use for that. And hopefully it assists you in your own digital transformation project if you have one ongoing or you want to start one. So the first step we do, and we always do, no matter what size of project, we would map out the process. As Neville said, that is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, because in this stage you will find out how the complexity of the work you're trying to do, which roles are doing the work, and what actual work is being done. After that, you can add some additional information, like what is the time it takes to do that step and what cost is associated to that step. And it helps you a lot in your process improvement, which is the next step. So obviously, if you have a process that has been ongoing for a couple of years, most likely things have been added to the process and not removed or revisited. So what we want to do is look at the process and see where we, by people process first, can get some more efficiencies, work out if the work has been done on the right level, as Neville said. And for technology-wise, can we add technology to either remove a step that is done by a human completely, or halfway there in the sense of, for example, creating first drafts, or in the maintain task of getting information from a different source, a website. Could we have a machine do that for, an example, on step one, the paralegal? And this all helps creating more efficient processes. Now, if you have your process complete and you have done your improvement, the only thing you don't have is a special product. You still have the same process with a bit of improvement and a bit of technology. So for your adoption, we would love to have something that we call the minimal lovable product. And the minimal lovable product is something you've heard before that is named the minimal viable product. But we don't like the viable product because it's just the bare minimum you want to do to make the product work. What we want to do is have a product that a good amount of people love. And as you know, if you love something, you can't, stop yourself, but tell everyone how much you love the product. And that's our goal. We want a lovable product so that it has its own marketing department you don't even know of, because the people will do it by themselves. But how do we get to that minimal lovable product? Now, obviously, we refer back to the process map, get all the roles, and we'll try to get a subject matter expert for that particular role. Obviously, we're trying here to find that person that is not afraid of change, that has good ideas, and we definitely do not want the person that says, this is how we've always done it. That's the one you want to skip. You want the one that wants change in their role or in their department. And then we ask the user to create user stories for that particular role. And as we see in the bottom, this is how we ask them to write it. And we want them to write it like this because it spikes creativity and it doesn't hold them back with past experiences or past technology restrictions. We just want to know what would make that product or this product something you would love. And we find that we always thought it would be a massive deal. It would be like launching a space rocket. But actually, the only thing people want is very simple and it needs to work for their role, like a good dashboarding or a first draft, or if we could get some information from this particular government website automatically and feed that into my dashboard, that would be great. And things like that make a product lovable. So obviously, you normally get too many, and we need to keep everything small. You start small, and then you iterate to a much larger project. But we take one or two of these roles, user stories that we like, and we put them in the big project. So you got all these roles, you got the process map, and we got all the user stories that we think would make an impact on the different people. Then we start going into the project management side of things. And what we don't like to do is, after all the excitement, everybody's happy, everybody's really excited about your product you're trying to create, is like the submarine here, dive on the water or in the real world, go into our basement, in our dark basement, and start developing the product we think you've told us to create, only to come up, service after 6 months, and show you a product that is not really what you wanted, and we have to go back to the drawing board. What we want to be, in this example, we want to be the dolphin. We want to have a contact point every week with the full team and the complete team. And because you have so many different roles in that team, it's quite diverse. So you get great ideas every week. But the most beneficial thing of having a weekly meeting to keep everybody engaged, but also to see if we're going wrong somewhere. So if we have understood a specific user story wrong, or if we are developing something not in the likings of the project team. In the worst case scenario, if you go completely wrong, you would only lose a week of your time. And instead of the submarine below, you would have months of lost work that you have to refit, again, just causing delays. So having touch points constantly with the team, with the subject matter experts, showing them, and we love showing them visually what's going on, so you see progress, keeps them engaged and keeps them telling other people about their lovable items in that particular product. So be the dolphin. The other thing I wanted to show, that's the theoretical side of things. I always like to show the practical side of things, so how we actually do this in BCLP Cubed. Like Neville said, we're using the Cube commercial contracting platform as an example. So on the left, we have the weekly team that is discussing the user stories, the progress of the meeting. And as you can see on the screen, it is actually being built in front of them and getting their feedback. So it's easy to move left or right or steer in the right direction if it goes wrong. And then on the right side, you have our development team. And you can see that it's a much smaller team, and they are constantly progressing forward, right? Any big discussions are happening on the left side in the meeting, any decision points. The development team should move forward constantly, shouldn't stop for long meetings, etc. They should just be fed new information from that project team. So it's very important to keep things moving forward. Just as an extra note, we deliver in 4 weeks. We would like to get our first minimal lovable product out there. Hence, it's so important to keep everybody in the same room and keep progressing forward, so that after the first week you have a product that you can launch, even if it's a small product, and then you iterate to a larger project. Very important to keep everybody engaged and happy and interested in your project. I also wanted to give an example of a user story, and where the combination between user story and process mapping comes to life is if you compare the user stories, and in this case, in this example, we compared the 6 user stories that were assigned for a dashboard or an overview. And we quickly found that 6 user roles had the same requirements for a dashboard with the same information that they wanted to see. So you could quickly see that you only had to build 1 dashboard for 6 different user roles. And this is how that dashboard then got displayed. And everybody asked for a history. And they didn't tell us they wanted a history line like we produced on the right, but they just said, I want to be able to see the history, right? I want you to be able to see the main details. Now, because you have those 6 user stories and the process map against that, you can just build 1 dashboard that serves 6 people. Again, a bit of efficiency and a bit of trying to get to a result quicker. The other one that I wanted to show is this user story. It's a client requirement, and in this case, it's about key term reporting. And the client wanted a good overview of the key terms, and they wanted to instantly see which one they have to act on, which are important, and which they don't have to look at because they're absolutely fine. And because you have such a diverse team, you get your IDs from different angles. So normally in legal, we will probably try to run to an Excel sheet or some sort of Word document to present these key terms to you. However, the technical team was thinking we can do something more interesting than that, than an Excel sheet, because technical people do not like grids or Excel sheets. However, legal teams love them. But we think we can do something better. And this idea, after reading this user story, came from our project manager, who in their world report mostly on red, amber, green statuses on specific line items in their project management. So we decided to build it out and see if it was effective, and we came up with this. And this is something that is quite unique in the market, where we start reporting key terms in a red, amber, green project management type of solution. And I just wanted to show this, that if we had the isolated project teams we normally have, you would talk to your legal, you would talk to your project management, you would talk to your process people, you would never have come to this idea, because you would never have discussed the key terms reporting with your project management, if that makes sense. So it's good to have that diverse team to get the different ideas out there. So final slide, because I'm hoping we get some questions out of this after this. The final slide is my top tips. One thing I always say is don't believe everything you get sold. Not all technology, the technology won't do it all, even if they say it. And my top tip for that one would be is if people are so confident in their own technology, ask them for a free pilot where you would do the driving on the software to make sure that it actually works as they are telling you it should work. Very important. The other thing I've been doing recently, and this is in the last half year, is looking outside of the legal technology market for technology. There's loads of technology you can use that does not have the label legal technology, but can actually be used in the legal industry. And we can think of document automation, for example. We probably know one or two of the main brands, but there are about 50 other ones out there that could easily do the same job and might not be a bit cheaper and a bit more flexible in what they can do for you. The open technology, it comes out of that. You probably have a technology that's really good in extracting your data from your contracts, and you probably have a really good technology to do your workflow. But both can't do the same thing. So you want to be able to integrate with these technologies with each other, and that's done by open technology. And you would normally hear the terminology APIs, and that is the technical term for being able to integrate technologies together. So you can use both the benefits of the workflow engine or the extraction engine, combine it into one product that works perfectly. Last but not least, my favorite one, don't be afraid to fail. Try it, but fail fast. If you see it not going the way you want it to go, or there's a lot of negative things about it, or it's too complicated to do at this point in time, fail it, bury it, and do something else. And that's my my thing over to you, Neville. A bit quicker because I wanted to get some questions, hopefully. In.
So I'm going to skip the summary at the end to leave us time for questions, if that's okay with you, Noah and Sigal.
Yeah, of course, of course. I can see there's a question. I'll just read it out loud, and Neville and Jody, you can take it. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights. Great to see you again, Neville. In your opinion, how should legal departments encourage innovation within their organizations? So that's the question by Esther.
Thanks, Esther. Hello. So I always think the best way to start is to identify an area which can really add value to the business, because in my experience, people, of course, value their legal departments, but there's a slight tendency to see legal as a cost center, or sometimes even as a barrier to getting business done quickly. So if one can identify an opportunity to create value in the business, which people outside of legal would understand and appreciate, then that, I think, is always a good place to start. And we've been talking quite a lot about contracts in the course of this presentation, and something improving the efficiency of the contract, I think, is quite easy for people to understand. So it might be automating first draft contracts. It might be giving the sales force an opportunity to produce their own contract through an automated self-help tool, something like that. If one can identify an area where the value is obvious to people in the business, not just in the legal department, then I think it becomes far easier to get support for innovation in the legal process. And as soon as you have one or two wins behind you, then it's much easier to make the business case for innovation elsewhere. Jody, do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. I think it was a really good explanation. The only thing I would say is that people are still afraid of innovation, and especially with the technology it brings. I think what we try to do is help them understand the technology there to help them to either get into a better position sooner or complete the very boring, repetitive task. A machine is very, very, helpful in that, doing that 24/7 and the whole, for a long time. So don't be afraid of technology. It's here to help you, not to replace you. It's quite important, I always say.
Neville, I would also add a question for myself. If you have perhaps any tips or recommendations on how to persuade management to allocate funds for legal operations. I mean, I think that once it's there, they will see the benefit. But before it's there, I think that may be a challenge to explain why you need to allocate such and such to do a project where someone doesn't really, it's difficult for them to envision, you know, the cost saving and time saving.
Yeah. Of course, in a way, it's good to be in a position where one is going to management with a business case for change and innovation rather than the other way around, which of course is the case with lots of legal departments where the finance director comes in and says, look, you know, you've got to cut 20% or 10% or 30% of your cost. I don't care how you do it. But you know, sometimes the pressure for change comes that way. So I think it's important to preempt that. And let's face it, what people in the business tend to understand most easily is an ability to save money. So if one can identify an area where you can save money through adopting some change, even if it involves some investment, but if one can show the business case of how an investment of X dollars would create a saving of Y dollars over a period of time, then it's you know, I would expect people would pay attention to that. But which is not to say that it's easy. I think one, and that's why I think one has to start with really small steps to begin to demonstrate both inside the legal department, but then build up the business case for presentation outside of the legal department of what one has been able to achieve with small steps. So even with some process improvement and just getting things a bit more streamlined, getting things a bit more organized, getting better collaboration, one can begin to improve efficiency in small ways and then use that as a building block for making a case for some investment in the legal department. I think the other important thing is alignment with the company's overall strategy. And I think if one can demonstrate that in order for legal to continue to be aligned to the company's strategy, certain change, innovation, investment needs to happen. Otherwise, that alignment will falter, is usually quite a strong argument with people in the business.
Neville, thank you. There was a follow-up question. I think you answered it partially, which is how do you put a price on the benefit of legal ops?
Well, one has to measure the cost, and I think you'll find that people are very quick to measure the cost of legal services and to measure the cost of in-house lawyers and in-house legal departments, because often it's seen as a cost center. So people will be very quick to identify the cost. And with legal operations, I think firstly, it's important to recognize that the purpose of legal operations is not only to save money. That's an important objective, but there are other objectives as well. Improving the process to produce a higher quality result. So better process equals better quality legal output, and better data capture enables better risk management. So it's not only about cost savings, but cost savings is an important objective. And I think one can measure, if you can get, so to give you one example, if through a process improvement exercise, one is able to say, here's a work stream which has been handled by experienced lawyers whose annual cost to us is $100,000, and we've now been able to break this down, and half of that work can now be done by more junior lawyers at who cost us $50,000 a year, then you can measure the cost saving. And, that's a place to start.
Sure.
Thank you. I think we've used up all of our time in a very good way. Thank you so much, Neville and Jody. Thanks, Sigal. Thank you, Nira Poran and the ACC. The information will be made available to everyone, and I'm sure all of the participants can contact Neville or Jody or Sigal and myself directly, and we'll be happy to provide any information that's wanted or required. So thank you all very much.
And see you at our next conference.
Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.